Hello and welcome to the People Power Lunch Hour show here on Philly Cam TV and WPPM LP in Philadelphia. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. On today's show, we are going to talk about reentry in Philadelphia with two organizers from Philadelphia FIGHT, from the Institute for Community Justice. They're going to talk about the Prison Reentry Summit, and we're going to have a more broad conversation about reentry here in Philadelphia. Stay tuned for all that and more on the People Power Lunch Hour show. Hey, welcome back. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber, and this is the People Power Lunch Hour show, broadcasting live from our Philly Cam Center City studios on TV on Comcast and Verizon, and also on WPPM 106.5 FM. Today's show, we are going to talk about reentry. We have two employees of Philadelphia FIGHT, which is a large nonprofit organization here in Philly that has been advocating for the HIV population for many, many years. As part of their many programs and services, one of them is the Institute for Community Justice, where they hold an annual Prison Reentry Summit. On today's show, I'm joined by Assata Thomas, who's a director of the Institute for Community Justice, and Grace Kinda, who's the program support coordinator. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So just to tell our listeners and our viewers out there a little bit about the Institute for Community Justice, it's a program of Philadelphia FIGHT founded to work to reduce not only the number of people in prison living with HIV, but also the lasting effect of mass imprisonment on marginalized communities. The Reentry Center is designed to equip and empower individuals and their families who have been impacted by mass incarceration. And the reentry team supports individuals with accessing critical resources and information and provides educational programs focused on skill development, community civic engagement, and advocacy.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more broadly speaking about reentry in Philadelphia. If you are aware about how many people are returning to Philadelphia every year, and what are some of the challenges and barriers people face as they're coming out of prison and reintegrating into society?
Sure. So just from State Road alone, on the jails on State Road, they see 32,000 persons a year that are coming in and out of State Road, not to include the state prisons. And so we see a lot of those folk that are coming out. A lot of the barriers that are faced are obviously jobs, being able to get a job, and not just a job, but a sustainable job. Mm-hmm. There are housing barriers, there are medical issues, there are both physical medical issues and mental issues as well. And so what ICJ does serves as a conduit to either refer them out to services that we don't actually have, but we also have some robust services in which we support many folk. And because we are a program of Philadelphia FIGHT, obviously we're connected to the 4 federally qualified health systems that we have. And so folk are able to get medical attention when they come home. One of the things I really want to talk about is Philadelphia FIGHT was birthed in advocacy and activism for HIV persons. And it's a little known fact that we work with more than folk who are HIV positive. And so my job as a new director is to get the word out that our reentry center, and indeed all of Philadelphia FIGHT, are working with folk, period. For us specifically, it's folk who have been affected by mass incarceration. They don't have to be living with HIV. They could just have been affected by mass incarceration, them and their families. And so we serve as one of the first places that they come to so they'll get an intake, they'll be assessed, and then what we don't have at our place, because I feel that there are a lot of services in Philadelphia, and so we're not competing, we're working with each other. And so we have things that we do wonderful and we do great, and we do those things. And for the things that we don't offer, we refer out. But the goal is that anyone who is reentering from prison, that they're not missed, and that we're supporting them in their reentry back into Philadelphia.
Do you work with them while they're still incarcerated, like people who are scheduled to be released, like say in a month or 2 months?
We absolutely do. We have a specific program, and Tracy Latimer is that manager for that program. It's a prison support program, and she actually works inside the jails before they come out, or if they're getting sentenced. In fact, we just went to a sentencing of someone last week, so she's advocating every step of the way. So absolutely we do.
I would also want to add the prison linkage program,
Yes.
which very much tallies with Philadelphia Fight's mission of providing culturally competent health care. And the prison linkages really offers that need that we find of chronic health conditions being a big predictor of death in the weeks following release for a lot of people coming from jail. So the prison linkages ran by headed by Trey Alexander. His job is to make sure that once people are engaged in the system, that they have a place to call and either inquire about the medication, receive support, receive case management. So even as they walk through that path of justice, there is someone who is going to be there, or an institution there to support them with their mental health needs if they need access to medication. If it's serious chronic conditions as HIV, cardiovascular disease, which actually kills a lot more people coming out of prison, being able to offer that basic necessity and able to connect them to those very essential life services as people are coming out, to help them bridge that gap as they engage with the reentry center, as they engage with their families, is one of the things that we're really proud of. Many things that we're proud of at ICJ to be able to offer to the population.
What are some of the health issues that people are dealing with while incarcerated? Are there people that go in somewhat healthy and then come out with some kind of disease or illness?
Absolutely. So of course, Hep C is on the rise and is a great of great concern in the system. And actually, we just got a grant to do some Hep C testing on State Road, and so Hep C is definitely one of the things that we are seeing on the rise. The folk that we're identifying with HIV, they typically are coming in. It's the folk that are coming back, but not so many new cases, thankfully, of HIV being located or specified in the jails. I would say also high cholesterol and high blood pressure because of the food, right? It's just loaded with sodium. And so those are also issues that folk are having coming out, the high blood pressure coming out as well.
Yeah, and heart disease.
Absolutely, all those things that are related, absolutely.
What's their access to healthcare like while they are incarcerated? I mean, is it completely non-existent? I mean, what?
No, they absolutely have health care, and it differs from, so that the health care that folk get when they're sent upstate to State Road is different. There are different dynamics and how that works. But for the health care that's on State Road, it's pretty substantial. And again, one of the things with our specific program, the Linkage to Care program, is that they are assuring that folk are getting the care that they need. So the care on State Road is pretty substantial. Yes.
Did you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to add, kind of adding, making a fuller dimension of health. We understand that prison is a traumatic experience, so a lot of people, despite how they entered into the system, face a lot of trauma by interacting with the structures in prison. So you'll find folks that either are marginalized identities, or women, or even men, in different respects and different shades of how they interact with it, experience PTSD to some extent. So that experience coming out of a prison system, even though you may not have a significant physical response, there is trauma that continues to follow the person, and makes it even more important that care and health is looked at from that perspective. And we understand the conditions that lead to poor health outcomes when people are released.
Absolutely. Yeah, and part of that population is a lot of people who are innocent waiting for trial that can't make bail. And that can be really traumatizing as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's part of, some of the reasoning to try to end, cash bail.
Yes.
With the amazing work being done in Philadelphia around organizing Mama's Bailout last year, with the continuing end cash bail, and talking to the new kind of political or attorney system in Philadelphia to really address that aspect of poverty, and poverty being a pathway into the criminal justice system. How can we address that from those very kind of economic perspective? How can we provide support to those types of issues?
Do you find that women are dealing with different health issues than the men?
Absolutely, just different issues, period. And so one of the things that we're working on at the Institute for Community Justice is just carving out a space for women's needs specifically, and how that impacts them, obviously, but the community. So a woman goes to jail, then their children, right? And all of the implications that has. And it just, like, it never ends for a woman who's incarcerated. And so dealing with those specific needs and the mental issues that oftentimes go unaddressed. There's a great impact on the women.
Yeah, and probably also dealing with sexual assault.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes. And not
Yeah,
to
we have to
mention the
name all these
trans.
things.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
And we say that although there's 93% men and 7% women, the statistics now in the justice system, there is a need to really highlight the specific conditions that put women involved in the criminal justice system. And these are things that we recognize historically have been gendered. So many of the initiatives or responses to assault, I'm not sure how to describe it, but the way that tactics of policing and rehabilitation have been purely from a male perspective. So when we look at looking at the same issue and the same statistics from a women's perspective, looking at 80% of women are single mothers, 80% of a high percentage of women have chronic mental illness, chronic physical care. They often are the caretakers of their families. So you find the burden being disproportionately put on women who are expected to come into their back from jails and still be expected to be their caregiver and still manage all these conditions while still being able to show themselves as a woman in society. So the reasoning for creating a space is really to allow that process to happen and allow the process of reentry to be supported at ICJ.
Yes. And not to speak of, the issues of trans folk that are incarcerated and all of the trauma that happens while they're incarcerated. Namely, if they identify as one gender, they're put into the jail that is identified by the birth gender. And so that's a huge other component of trauma that is happening that we oftentimes don't talk about.
And their access to health care as well. I listened to Chelsea Manning talk about how hard it took years to get access to the hormones, and she got very little, the minimum, only because they threatened a lawsuit, and it took a lot just to get that. And so that's somebody that has a lot of support and people power, but there's so many people that they don't have that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. One of the things that I really, really love about ICJ is that the advocacy that we provide for folk. And so, for example, Tracy Latimer, again, who was the prison support coordinator, when she goes to advocate for folk and is going to the sentencing and going to all of these other court dates, oftentimes she's the only one there. There are no family members represented. There is nobody else. She is the sole person that's there representing the person. And so that is huge. And so when you think about how many people are incarcerated without anyone advocating for them for something as simple as they didn't get their commissary, that's major. So if you have that, and then if there's a healthcare concern, if somebody needs to be seen, if you don't have somebody on the outside advocating for you, it could be very, very difficult to get just basic needs met.
Right, which is why having access to communication and being located near their family and support system is really important too, because they move people around a lot.
Absolutely.
As well, which can
Absolutely.
also affect their access to certain things.
Absolutely. And in Pennsylvania, you can go as far as 8 hours to have to see a loved one. Yeah,
and a lot of people can't afford to travel or not physically able to make that journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're just tuning in to the People Power Lunch Hour show, I've been speaking with Assata Thomas and Grace Kinda, and they're with the Institute for Community Justice. a program and department of Philadelphia FIGHT. We've been talking about reentry needs and the prison population, and what are some of the challenges and solutions to deal with these issues. We're a solution show.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you have found to be successful programs, initiatives, not necessarily coming through your organization, but just citywide, that has helped reduce the recidivism rate?
So I think that the new DA that we have is definitely doing a phenomenal job of changing some policies in terms of, as we said, folk who are doing low-level crime being released, right? Or just not, being released. So I think that that is definitely a step in success. I also think that being able to address folk where they are, and so at ICJ, for instance, everyone's not just in a lump sum. Like, this is your issue. Like, just dealing with folk one-on-one to find out what exactly is it that we can do to support you, so folk identify what they need. You know, we don't identify, they self-identify and help to make the plan. And so I think that one of the things that we can do community-wise is we need more employers who are willing to hire folk who have a record. And it's wonderful to start at a job at McDonald's or Wendy's or Taco Bell. That's wonderful. But we need sustainable jobs and employers to really take a risk. And I say a risk, but the ones who we are engaged with work out very, very well. And so that's what we need. We need more employers to assist us in stopping the recidivism, because as we know, employment is the number 2 reason why folk go back.
Yeah, and to pay a living wage, because
Absolutely.
people come out, they have child support debts, they have loans, they have all kinds of things. They don't go away when you are incarcerated.
Absolutely
If
not.
anything, it mounts, the interest mounts, and you come out in the negative.
Absolutely.
Owing. And so these minimum wage jobs, you know, they're not really a means to pay off these debts and to be able to continue to save and
Absolutely.
find housing. Because housing is another big
Absolutely.
issue, right?
Big issue.
Absolutely. That's the major issue.
On a basic level, when we talk about access to public housing, there are, people with convictions are often excluded from even applying for public housing. If you couple that with a lack of sustainable employment, the types of communities that people are going into, because when you talk about mass incarceration, you're talking about massive people being moved out and being moved in with maybe increased needs and even less access to care or access to the basic services they need to overcome and thrive. So when we're talking about empowering people, we are able to see, ICJ has a healthy mix of folks that are working with convictions. These are returning citizens who are centered at the conversation on reentry. And I think it's so important to stress that fact, because being from the outside in or having different shades of experience doesn't quite give the type of context that someone who has been through that experience can offer to the person who's coming out the next day, coming out tomorrow. They are the forefront of the initiatives that are going to happen. So even as we think of the different solutions as they come to housing, chronic care, and other basic services, centering returning citizens at the process is so key to success.
Do you all deal with people who are held in ICE detention centers? Because that's happening a lot as well. People are being scooped up, and some of them are here legally. They have some type of residency or green card status, and yet they're being imprisoned. They're prisons, right?
We haven't as of yet. But we're certainly available to it. We haven't as of yet.
One of the things that we say is we'll welcome anyone who has been impacted.
Absolutely.
And this will be either in an immigration capacity or otherwise. So we've interacted with clients or cases where someone has come in and has experienced either trauma or social service need, and we've come to understand the person as needing services. So at this point, we never turn anyone away. We help to kind of frame the need that the person has and redirect. We understand that a lot of people come in for basic services such as healthcare or housing, and then when you start understanding the context and history, there may be a bit of freedom to talk about the stigma of having a record. And once we're able to establish that and frame a plan of action, we're able to refer to different places. So I know we have the Nationality Services Center, which is a great resource here. So we're able to connect and provide options for people. And I think that's our biggest strength, providing options and keeping people first and give them the opportunity, so they can have the opportunity to design their own freedom.
One of the things that's interesting, though, is the stigma that you spoke about. Even though we are a reentry center, that is what we do, you can see the reverberating effects of the stigma because folk are even sometimes reluctant to talk about it during an intake. And so this continuum of, I was incarcerated, you still see the effects of it. And so a part of our job is to just it's okay. And whenever you're ready to talk about it, at whatever level you're ready to talk about it, but we can address these issues until that comes out. So this stigma is certainly real and certainly still happening.
Yeah, because people judge them.
Oh, absolutely.
They might not even know what kind of crime they were convicted of, or even if they were really guilty, because a lot of people,
That's right.
Because of lying police and misconduct. I mean, this comes straight from a lot of the documents released as of the new DA took office. So we know that there's been misconduct with prosecutions and, testimonies that have convicted people or they were committing perjury. But there is this perception that if you were incarcerated, that you are violent, which, I think there's a lot of people who, are not doing anything violent at all, like even just writing a bad check can get you
Absolutely.
a prison sentence, right?
Absolutely.
What do you want to say to the community? How should we look at people who are returning? I mean, I think if you have had a family member who has been, and for a lot of Latinos and African Americans, for us, it's more common, and so there's a little bit more compassion, but I think that there's the opportunity, to tell our listeners and our viewers out there, you don't need to look at people all in the same way.
Absolutely, and I think that you don't even know who you're talking to sometimes. And when you're having dialogue with people, you don't know what they've been through. And so when you're judging someone or prejudging someone, you just be very aware of who you're speaking to and that you're not giving folk a second time. And also, if they have a criminal record, or if they have anything else, that's what you know about. That's what we can see. How about what you have that nobody can see? And that's how I look at it. We all have something. Others are just more obvious and more transparent. What about you? What do you have? So before you begin to judge somebody else, check yourself. Look in your own closet. Look down your own lineage. Look at your own family, your friends, your children's friends. And so just don't be so quick to judge someone based on what you think, what you heard, what they look like. I think that stigma part is so damaging. And as you said, in the African American community and the Latino community, it's just, that's a part of our life, and it's sad to say, but it's what we deal with, right? And we learn how to navigate that. And so I think that folk need to not judge.
I think an important element is that, there are disproportionate arrests of African Americans and Latinos and immigrants, and also harassment of trans people as well.
Absolutely.
We're all committing crimes, right?
Yes.
But there is racial profiling. There are harsher sentences. There's a lot of institutional racism that plays a huge part in it. And it's we have to talk about that. Absolutely. Because there's a reason why there's more African Americans and Latinos, and especially young people.
Yes.
So I really target people 17 to 25, at least in Philadelphia, for incarceration. And we also have to talk about, the prison industrial complex. Why is this happening, right? There are profits to be made by incarcerating people.
Certainly. One thing that, it's certainly a place that we want to explore more is the school to prison pipeline and how this feeds into the mass incarceration pipeline. When we talk about the Lucerne scandal, if I'm not wrong, about the juvenile justice court and it being a pathway into the juvenile justice facilities, that was an actual thing that the judges conspired to actually put bodies in prison. So when we're talking about issues like that, when we're talking about young people who are being policed You know, they receive more harassment within the school than outside of the system. When you see, you know, young men in hoodies being killed in the street, you know, it becomes something that, you know, a conversation that is full of empathy. And I think when we talk about justice, we're really talking about justice as empathy, justice as restorative, justice as healing, because there's so many of us that have committed crimes and are out. So why is it that those people are in jail? It's important for us to start considering what the system is creating for us and really start challenging the system so that we can create a system that is built for us and is built for community health, is built to bring people into a place where racism and heterosexism and sexism can be challenged and addressed you know, with everyone's voices at the table.
Absolutely. When you think about the, if you think about the opioid epidemic versus the crack epidemic, that's a clear example of racism. When the crack epidemic was going on, it was mostly among African Americans, and so the system, no one cared. It was basically let them kill themselves. They're animals, they're savages. It was an addiction, right? And we got the laws with the what's with Reagan, the laws, the 3 strikes, the drug laws, right?
Yeah, like controlled substances.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
So now we fast forward to the opioid epidemic, which is affecting Caucasian folk, right? So now the response is totally different. And I am not negating that there is an issue that needs to be addressed. Hear me. The differences, though, in how people responded to the crack epidemic versus the response to the opioid epidemic. We need drug rehabs. There were all these other flowery things that are happening. But when crack was going on, that 80s epidemic was happening, we didn't get compassion and empathy or sympathy. Lock them all up and throw away the key. So the responses, depending on the demographic, is clearly racial. And so we don't talk about those things. That's clear for me.
Yeah, and crack and cocaine are the same, right?
Yeah.
Crack is
Absolutely.
a different form of cocaine.
Absolutely.
But the sentences were much, much longer for crack, and there's a reason for that as well.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's based in racism, and it's like, well, this is the same drug. Why are they sentencing people differently? It's because of the population that was utilizing crack. And then we could do a whole episode on how
Certainly.
how did crack get there?
Right? Yes.
Well, if you're just tuning in, you're watching and listening to the People Power Lunch Hour on Philly Cam TV and WPPM 106.5 FM, where you've been talking about mass incarceration, reentry, and more with my guests Assata Thomas and Grace Kinda. And when we return, we're going to talk more about some of the educational opportunities for the community that they will be offering via their Prison Reentry Summit. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the People Power Lunch Hour show, and you're also listening on WPPM 106.5 FM, watching on Philly Cam TV. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. On today's People Power Lunch Hour show, we wanted to address the issue of mass incarceration and returning citizens here in Philadelphia. There are a number of really amazing organizations offering programs to this population. And I'm joined here in the studio by some employees of Philadelphia FIGHT, which is a nonprofit here in Philly that's historically known for their HIV/AIDS advocacy, but they also operate the Institute for Community Justice, which operates a number of prison reentry programs. I'm joined by the director of the Institute for Community Justice, Assata Thomas, and also the program support coordinator, Grace Kinda. We've been having a very spirited conversation on some of the factors and variables and institutional racism that plays a part in mass incarceration and how it affects people's lives. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about some of the educational opportunities that they offer. One of the highlights of their program every year is the Beyond the Walls Reentry Summit and Prison Healthcare Conference that welcomes all people interested in learning more about the impact of mass incarceration and health disparities on our communities. Can you talk a little bit about this annual event? And you've done it for a few years now, correct?
Yes, awesome. So I'm really excited about this year because typically it was housed in the same month as the Prevention Summit, which is in June. And so now we're kind of standalone. Our summit this year, the Prison Summit, is October 5th. And so we're super excited about that. And we're standing alone gives us the opportunity to just focus on mass incarceration and what that means for nationally and Philadelphia, of course. And so now is the time to submit workshops about different things. Grace is going to go into that a little more thoroughly about what type of workshops submissions can be done. But I invite people to come to our first planning meeting is actually tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the Institute for Community Justice, 1207 Chestnut Street. Second floor is our first planning meeting, and then you can come and get on our mailing list and be apprised of the next meetings. But we are super duper excited this year that it's a standalone conference. So we're looking forward to that.
I believe Kyle, when he came on People Power Lunch Hour, said it was so popular. There was a lot of interest, and it just kept growing every year. So we decided this year to make it its own event.
Yes.
I believe it started in the late 2000s and expanded from Temple University to where we're doing it at the Convention Center. Talking a little bit about the committee, the purpose of the committee is really to have all voices represented and to have that kind of creative or out of the box thinking when it comes to the type of content, community educational content we want to see around mass incarceration in Philadelphia. There are 11 tracks for which to apply, so everyone has an opportunity to apply, and includes tracks from women, youth, activism, school to prison pipeline, which is a new initiative we're doing this year. So there's a lot of opportunities, housing, employment. So we do offer, to the extent that we can, a very broad opportunity for people to bring in their thoughts and ideas. The committee is a place for us to kind of have clarity on what that is, and also kind of see what else we can do to put the word out there with regard to the work that's happening in Philadelphia and the education initiatives we want to do as a community, a reentry community.
Who's invited to attend or participate in the conference?
Everyone is invited to attend. People who have folk that have been affected by mass incarceration, people who are work with folk who have been affected by mass incarceration, folk who just want to learn more and really get the real deal about what's happening. As part of the treks, we have folk from behind the walls that are that will be speaking, and so that's major. So anyone who wants to know anything about mass incarceration and how that affects us as a city, and how that affects us as a society, and how that affects us as a nation is welcome to come.
So particularly for teachers, people in the health industry, people just working with the general public, and just community members, right?
Absolutely.
Certainly. There are opportunity to receive credits for coming, so we find a lot of students or professionals coming in for those classes. We have very grassroots oriented work from returning citizens focused spaces that are designed to speak of that experience or to lend a voice, provide that storytelling component in the summit. So we do very much to provide that holding space, and I believe very in line with what we do at FIGHT and what we do at ICJ to create that space for people to flourish.
That's great. Yeah, it says through the panels, presentations, and interactive workshops, the summit explores innovative approaches to health and reentry challenges facing our communities, but also brings relevant policy issues to the forefront, providing attendees with the opportunity to become involved in local and national advocacy work. And so that's really important too, to have family members and people impacted by this to really be involved in advocating for reforms and policy changes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Certainly, when we talk about not just the individuals that are directly impacted, we talk about children. You know, children with incarcerated parents, there are about 2.3 or more than 2 million kids with a parent or caregiver in the jails. There are about 81,000 kids with a caregiver or parent in Pennsylvania correctional institutions. So when we talk about the impacts of that, and when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, when we talk about the communities in which these children are growing up in, when we talk about rehabilitation and restorative practices and connecting fathers and children, connecting mothers and children beyond the walls, it's really an opportunity for us to really look at community help from the ground up. You know, so children are often forgotten out of the conversation of incarceration, but it's something that we want to bring in and pay special attention to within this new direction.
Can you talk about the Key Spot Center? Do you still have that? And the,
We
and
do.
The computer and the Reentry Center?
Yeah, we do. So the Key Spot Center is in conjunction with the City of Philadelphia and our computer lab, and it's open Monday through Friday, and folk can come in and get digital literacy if they just need a space to use a computer, have access to a computer for whatever, checking their mail, applying for jobs, Facebook even. It's just a place for people to come to have access to a computer. So there's specific times for the Key Spot is 1 to 5
Tuesday
Tuesday through Friday, and on Monday we use it for Excel classes, Word classes, any digital literacy. And the part that I love about it is that it's digital literacy literally from the most basic, like what is a mouse?
Turning on and off the computer.
Yes, to spreadsheets. And so folk can come and get come and get information about how to successfully operate in this digitized world.
That's really important too, because so many services you have to apply online. You know, like unemployment and food stamps and healthcare, and if you've been incarcerated for quite some time, when you come out, you might not be up to date with, you know, the latest technology. And so it's nice that there's a place people go to get that access.
Absolutely. So for example, we have now 3 of the former juvenile lifers who have been in prison 43 years, 32 years, and 30 years respectively. And so that's a place where they can go in a safe space and learn how to operate computer. And so that's necessary. And as you said, just about everything is done. Job applications now, they're being phased out, these handwritten things. And so it's vitally important to operate in today's world that you know how to use a computer successfully.
And one thing that we often, I'm always amazed, is the intellect that exists. And when you talk about access to information on the outside, if you do not know or do not have the tools you need to have access to the greater information, whether to empower yourself, to advocate, that single barrier of not knowing or how to operate, going on the browser, can have a detrimental impact, especially if someone is working to build themselves. So those gaps, those connections that are needed to help, support someone on their process towards, reentry and empowerment are, I think, I think what you're speaking to and is so powerful to the work that we do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who they educate themselves while incarcerated as well. I've been amazed to hear stories, people getting their GED, getting college credits, getting bachelor's degrees. And so is that part of it, helping people, go to maybe a community college or continue that education?
Absolutely. So CCP specifically has a program for folk who prior incarceration, and so and they are so supportive in supporting them. So yes, it absolutely is. They're working at that, and it's working out very well.
That's really great. Well, we're going to be launching a Reentry radio program here
Oh.
on WPPM. And I think it's just really important to share these stories of all these people who have done positive things while incarcerated and also overcome many barriers,
Yes.
when they come out, and can be an inspiration and help other people, because the people that can most understand are the other people themselves. Have you developed leaders from this group of people? With the HIV program, there have been a lot of folks who took the classes and everything, and then themselves became advocates and leaders.
Yeah. So the HIV, the Teach program is a wonderful example to what you just said. We've just started a peer mentorship group, which I think is about a month young now. And we just checked in on yesterday, and they're doing a wonderful job of peers supporting peers. And so what I like about it is that it's very much a mixed group. So you have some older G's, if you will, that are in the group, and then you have some younger men, and it's mixed across ethnicities, but they have that common bond of having been incarcerated. And so that's working out really well. So yes, there are some leaders emerging right from that group.
Yeah, and even people who are leaders themselves while they were incarcerated, advocating
Absolutely.
For more rights and more access to
Absolutely.
services.
Yeah.
We've had a few people on People Power Lunch Hour talking about all these amazing things.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about is the mental health stigma as well, in terms of helping people get that treatment. And you talked about PTSD, being something that happens that maybe they're not even aware that they have. How do you connect people to these services, or help them maybe through a family member even, go get some help?
Good question.
Well, mental health, as we know, is a very complex system as we even understand it. The way treatment is done in the Pennsylvania system is quite complicated. So bringing someone into care, mental health care, means the ability to assess correctly, the ability to know the needs correctly, and the ability to connect them to services where they'll continue to engage and get better. So from a mental health perspective, I see a needs assessment being very key. And I think that's one thing that the case managers at the Reentry Center are able to do a first analysis of. How is this person doing from a holistic perspective? Provide the person with the grounds to which they can express maybe, whether it's depression that they've been experiencing, or lend a voice to what's going on during the process, the first steps of reentry. Once that is established, then we are able to identify interventions that are useful. So Philadelphia FIGHT has the TREE program, which primarily sees folks that are there for drug and alcohol, because you also have to acknowledge the impact of substance use, the impact of addiction on the prison population, right? So when we talk about holistic mental health care, we talk about the ability to provide substance use treatment as is useful, whether it's harm reduction, whether it's abstinence counseling, whether it's medication maintenance, and opening those options to people and providing that key psychosocial support, because we understand that people have the innate strength. People are resilient. And I think when we talk about returning citizens, we often have to change that narrative of these are people that are resilient, right? So when you offer services, you offer it from a strength building perspective. What do you see as your freedom? Where do you see you want to be mental health wise? What will be useful to you going forward? So we come at it from a very caring, you hold the controls. We'll help you identify what's happening and help follow up with you as you follow the path of mental health. Mental health is a life for many people. It's a work that requires a lifetime, and we're here to say that, as with chronic illnesses such as HIV or cancer or cardiovascular, you can live and you can overcome and you can thrive.
Have you seen any models around the world where they're doing really progressive or innovative things when it comes to either the way they incarcerate people or maybe don't incarcerate them, and how they're, dealing with people afterwards? I saw a documentary of a prison in the Netherlands that was like on an island where there's no cells, and they're allowed to farm and fish and do all these things, and and no one ever tries to escape, even though there's no cells, they're not quote unquote imprisoned in that way. And I thought that was very interesting. They obviously still have to go away, but it didn't seem as traumatic as what some people have to go through in the United States. Have you heard of anything happening in other states or other countries?
I haven't.
Yeah, I'll say that, the U.S. has the dubious honor of being,
The
the state that incarcerates most of its people in the world. So in terms of what is doing wrong, the U.S. has a lot to talk about on that aspect. What I see is a difference between maybe the European countries, because other countries have different histories and different contexts. When we talk about racism or the discrimination, the way these institutions play out in the U.S. is quite unique. But one thing, and I think I saw the article you were talking about, that they were fishing, they did their work, but still knew the purpose for which they were incarcerated or put back, or put behind the walls for whatever reason. But a vein that I saw that was in there was you do the punishment to fit the crime, for lack of a better term, and the idea is not for you to leave prison or leave the incarceration or leave the justice system and continue to be punished for whatever you were convicted of. And I think that vein is very much missing in the US politics, because once you come in, the criminal conviction is pretty much a burden that you have to carry with you for life, even if you spend 42 years in jail. So it's that disproportionate burden that's placed on people in the US that is different from the way that it looks like in maybe the more progressive countries in Europe. But the vein of justice continues to remain the same.
Yeah, and other countries have also not criminalized drug usage.
Exactly.
In the Netherlands, Portugal, Switzerland, they've even been penalized by the UN for taking progressive measures, but it's actually reduced the number of people who are dying of overdose.
Yep.
Exactly.
So it's another thing to think about. Why are we arresting people, for just being in possession of a drug when their only crime is, suffering from an addiction?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of compare. We often in America think we're the best, but in this vein, we're definitely not doing anything progressive.
That's exactly what I was going to say. When you think you're the best, you don't think there's anything to compare to. And so, unfortunately, America has this posture as though they are the best. And so that disables you from looking at other things that may work if you just look. So, there's this arrogance. That's what I want to say. There's this arrogance that America has that disallows it to look at other things.
And we were talking about this in the car. I'm not sure if the statistic there's been a more recent statistic, but Philadelphia has, of the 10 largest population cities, it has the highest rate of per capita incarceration.
Absolutely.
So Philadelphia has its own kind of, crown, for lack of a better term, and the type of work that's needed in Philadelphia. People are left out of Philadelphia that don't even live. They probably were moved from Wyoming and moved to a state prison, and their first point of access is to come to Philadelphia to see where the next point. What do I do? People get released with nothing but their clothes on their back, and you're told, go home. It was nice to meet you. What type of justice system are we creating when those are the types of conditions our returning citizens are coming to?
Yeah, it's like they're setting them up for failure.
Oh, absolutely.
So they can
Absolutely.
come back
It's the whole industrial complex.
and there's a lot of prisons that, they profit from the free labor as well.
Of course.
There's a lot of corporations too. I mean, Whole Foods, Target, Walmart, they get products made very inexpensively through free prison labor. The movie Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
Shows a scene where
Yes.
a competitor says, I can't compete with you anymore because you don't have you're not charging any wages. And so and this is still happening right now. And I think people need to understand, again, all of the factors and variables to lead into the situation. Why do we have so many? Pennsylvania also has the highest number of juvenile convictions and people incarcerated as well.
Yes.
Which is, another element of the school to prison pipeline. So before we end, we have just a few more minutes. I just want to recap. We've been talking with Assata Thomas and Grace Kinda, and they've been talking about mass incarceration and the prison population and reentry. They're with Philadelphia FIGHT and the Institute for
Community
Justice. There's a lot of things to read.
Yes.
And they have a lot of really wonderful programs and services that serve the reentry community and their families. And they have an upcoming summit in October where they are currently accepting workshop proposals from community members to be able to share their knowledge to address all of the things surrounding this very important issue. So if you could, before we end, tell people one more time how they can access your services, and just talk at the end again, just the dates for the summit.
Sure. So you can access our services by coming to 1207 Chestnut Street, Philadelphia, second floor ICJ, and someone will be there to greet you and do an initial intake. I also want to say this, we also have in this same building, we have the Jonathan Bell Health Center, which sees anyone. We also have a new pediatric clinic, and we also have a dental clinic. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop there at 1207. You can get your social services handled and the wraparound services for yourself and your children. So I will say that about our location is ideal. And I'll let Grace talk about the Prison Summit.
Yes, of course. I'll say that our phone number, if anyone is listening, our phone number is 215-525-0460. And a little bit more information about the workshop. The deadline for our workshops is June 18th, 2018. So there's still quite some time to go back and see. I would recommend going to the FIGHT website, www.fight.org, and look through our programs, or you'll see the Institute for Community Justice, learn more about us and the work that we do. And you'll find information about workshops and how to submit. If any questions, 215-525-0460.
Oh, and the meeting again that's happening tomorrow?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. The meeting is tomorrow at 10 o'clock, ICJ, 1207 Chestnut Street.
We're also on Facebook, and you can find us at Institute for Community Justice. Yes.
Well, I want to thank both of you for speaking with us today. I think this is such an important issue, and it's a community issue, right?
Absolutely.
It affects everybody, since we all have to live with each other. And, I just want to say that there are so many wonderful, caring, intelligent, great individuals who have served their time and are productive, awesome members of society. So give them a chance. Find out their story, and let's try to eradicate the stigma against people who are returning citizens.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, you've been watching the People Power Lunch Hour show on PhillyCam TV, on Comcast and Verizon, and also listening on WPPM 106.5 FM. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode. You can find this episode and all of our episodes on phillycam.org and also on our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at PhillyCam. If you would like to be a member of the People Power Lunch Hour show, you can contact us by going to the PhillyCam website or also hitting us up on social media. We would love to talk to you if you have a community engagement or people power issue. Thank you so much for watching and listening.